Good evening. Thank you for coming this evening. My name is Joe McTaggart from Walls and Futures. I'm going to run through a brief presentation to give you a bit of an understanding of what Walls and Futures is about, the markets that we address, and our plans to as we move forward. Walls and Futures is a social housing REIT, real estate investment trust, and our aim is to provide housing for some of the most vulnerable in society. We're working to create a positive social impact along with a financial return, and we're doing this by building a portfolio of high-yielding residential properties. Our long-term goal is to create a total net return of between 7 and 9%, of which 3 to 4% will be paid out in the form of a dividend. A bit of a history and a background of the business. Founded in 2008 as an asset manager and property investment company. We launched our first fund in 2011, the Walls and Futures London Growth Fund, and working with private investors. It was a closed-ended fund investing in Southwest London, central and Southwest London, acquiring residential properties, redeveloping them, creating value, and then renting them out. Over a 5-year period, we generated a net return of just under 42% without the use of debt. And working with our shareholders, or our investors at that point, they wanted to continue with what we were doing. So during 2016, we restructured the business, looking at doing more of the same, but a slightly different sector of the market, social housing. And towards the back end of 2016, November, we joined the Next Exchange, raised an additional £1 million from our existing shareholders and took the company public. So we're on the NEX, and our ticker is WAFR, Walls and Futures REIT. During 2017, amongst various things of making our first investment in social housing, we also became members of the Social Stock Exchange. And if you're not aware of the Social Stock Exchange, think of it of the fair trade for investment. More and more prevalent today, people are also looking to make, when they're making investments, are looking at the social impact. What is this business doing, as well as making money? And we recently joined the MSCI IPD index, and I'll touch on those later on in the presentation. Now, for us, social housing is divided into 5 key areas. Supported housing, which is housing with care and support. Extra care, which actually earlier on in one of our presentations was brought up as well. But for us, in our segment, we're looking at care for 55 plus. Step-down accommodation, which is more in the health sector, which is, in old-fashioned terms, convalescing homes. They're coming back. Temporary accommodation, which is to look at taking on the growing problem of homelessness throughout the UK, and general needs, which is looking at building socially affordable rental properties throughout the UK. So those are the key areas that we look at. But our current focus at the moment is supported housing, which is care and support for vulnerable people. And it covers things like autism, challenging behaviours, learning and or physical disabilities, mental health needs, or potentially life-changing injuries, accidents, and etc. Now, 2017, the figures were that there was circa a need for about 125,000 places in supported housing. And during that point, there were just over 15,500 places. That was a shortfall. And that's estimated to grow by, if we go to 2025, to almost 47,000 places. Now, why is this growth happening in the sector? Is A, there's been underinvested in all of social housing over the last 10 years. But also you've got an increase in demand. Part of that is driven by something called Transforming Care, which is a big central government initiative, which is to move people out of institutional care settings into supported housing. And which was driven by something called the Winterbourne Review. And we've also got the issue of hidden carers. So very often you have families taking care of their children who may have various needs. But over time, those young children become adults who are taken care of by their families, their parents, and now their parents get to a point where A, they can either no longer cope or able to offer the right level of support, or they themselves become older and need help and support. So what the local authorities often has happened is because you're looking after your own family, you're not in the system, so no one's really budgeting for you. You don't exist up until suddenly there's an explosion where they now need to look after elderly parents and an adult, which they haven't. So that's kind of feeding into the system. Now, our process in investing is we've taken a slightly different approach, but our first port of call is to work with local authority and NHS commissioners, because they at the top level work on the strategic plan of what is needed over the next 10 to 20 years. So we engage with them to work out how we can help to support that. And one of the key issues is a lack of investment from central government, and they need to deliver this pretty rapidly. We then move on and engage with a registered provider, and they are either a housing association or a charity, who are basically tasked with delivering that care. So the local authority puts it all together, this is what we need, and then the registered provider actually delivers that. In concert, we look at properties, we look at opportunities where properties that will match the requirement. Finally, we look at that and then we put together the financial package that sits around that. And what we're looking to do is deliver a high quality product and project that meets the need, but also what we call a term under a sustainable funding package. It's got to be cost effective for the public purse, but at the same time does have an element of a commercial return for our shareholders. Now, it is at this point, once we've actually got the contracts put in place, and only then do we go off and make a purchase and an investment and acquire something. We don't buy anything on spec and hope someone will rent it from us. It is only now. Once it's been developed, we then move on with the final acquisition and then hand over the delivery to the registered provider, and people move in. It's important to note that we, Walton Futures, don't do any, we're not involved in the care. That's taken care of by the commissioning and the care provider and the registered provider. We focus on investment and on providing the housing. Now, there are a number of strategies investing in the market space. We've seen it's quite prevalent, is to buy existing portfolios. It's a way of getting into the market quite quickly and generating a return, an income. From our point of view, it's not something that we're expressly quite keen on, just because there are a number of challenges within that. First and foremost, what you're doing is you're buying existing assets from a third party. So there may be a premium involved in that, and there's an element of a financial arbitrage. Secondly, you're actually not really adding any capacity. So from a commissioner point of view, you're not adding actually any value to them. You're just buying existing properties that they're already using. And we're very much trying to work in partnership with commissioners to help support their transforming care agendas. You also have a potential issue with the ability to perform enough due diligence across your portfolio to make sure that you're buying something from a property perspective that meets the quality, especially from our point of view, of what we'd like to deliver. And one of the key challenges, for example, we've reviewed several portfolios over the last few weeks, and illustrations being a house which in the surface looks amazing, it works, but is 50 to 75 metres from a motorway. And it's far too close for someone that might have a need and then run out the door. And what the first thing you see is basically a major motor road. It's not a good, from our point of view, there's a lot of risk involved in that. Our preferred method to actually invest is actually going out there, finding an opportunity, working with the commissioners and our partners, acquiring that, redeveloping it, and putting it into use and then leasing it out. We're also forward funding developments where, again, based on a strategic need for the local authority or the NHS Trust, is to build out specific projects and utilising potentially modular housing, which means we can actually deliver those homes quicker, deliver that capacity quicker to the marketplace. The benefit for us as well as a business is they actually start paying out an income a lot sooner than if we were going using traditional building methods, which potentially could have a build timeline of 24 to 36 months. So with modular, you can bring it down to probably 12 to 18 months. Now, as in the way of a case study, this is a property we acquired and invested in late last year. This came on stream and was handed over I believe it was late August, early September. It's a Grade 2 listed building in the market town of Stroud in the Cotswolds. And it's gone through many different uses through its life, but more recently it was a 9-bedroom HMO, house of multiple occupation. And in conjunction with our partner, we redeveloped the property to create what we have at the front is 3 self-contained 1-bedroom flats on the ground, first and second floor, to enable people to live independently. In the middle, there is staff accommodation. So actually on this particular site, there's 24/7 care. At the rear of the property, we've got an additional annex, which is a 3-bedroom apartment. And within that, I keep pressing the wrong button here. Within that, we've got a large communal space, kitchen, and we've also got specialist bathing facilities, wet room, height adjustable bath, and we've got track and hoist systems throughout the entire ground floor. And the reason for this extra investment is basically to give this property a much longer life and to enable the people that make this their home that it can be for as long as possible. Now, for us, there's a social impact, which is important for us as a business, is that what we've done is we've provided a quality home and with specialist support for 6 adults. We've taken them from an institutional or residential care setting into supported living. And previously, they actually lived in, if you like, an old country manor, miles from anywhere, and it's quite isolating. And so now they're pretty much close to town, they're more within the community and having increased independence, which for us is quite important. Financially, we've got a fantastic asset, a beautiful building, which has had a lot of investment with a great life ahead of it. It's been let on a 25-year lease to our partner, a charity in this particular case. And they look after about 2,500 people nationally, so a very good partner at that point on a full repairing and self-insuring lease, and rents are adjusted in line with inflation. So I think it's a good outcome for us from a financial point of view. Our current portfolio includes 4 properties. 25% is social housing, as we've just seen. The others are in London, in Southfields and in Wimbledon Park, and they're part of our existing portfolio from the London Growth Fund. 100% is supported housing, and overall, as far as number of places, 43% is supported. As we grow and continue our investment in the sector, these metrics will change and it will become more and more supported rather than the private rented sector. But I want to bring this up just more of as a way of illustration, just to look at the effect of our strategy moving forward. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we joined MSCI's IPD Residential Index. For those who may not be aware or know too much about MSCI, they measure a lot of different asset classes and have a lot of indices, particularly in property globally. And I know in the UK they have a number of commercial indexes which report quarterly. So we're now joined with the Residential Index, which reports annually at the moment. And it combines about 83 portfolios. We are one of them. We're probably the smallest in the index. The other side of the scale are people like Invesco Perpetual and I believe it's, I forget now. I've gone blank. I want to say Grosvenor, but it's probably one of the others. But it covers some 2,400 assets, and an asset is, it could be, for example, an individual asset could be a building with 31 or 2-bedroom apartments with a capital value of about 16 billion. So it's a pretty big index and pretty comprehensive. The reports, the figures were released for 2017, the end of last year, and the index itself, the total return, so it strips out all the costs of running the business, it's just looking purely at the portfolio, and the index did a total return of income and capital of 7%. We're pretty happy with our return. The Walls and Futures portfolio generated a return of 11.5%. And I think, although we are a very small constituent of that, I think it goes to illustrate that our investment strategy of creating value, of making the investment and doing the hard work, rather than just purchasing existing portfolios, can actually feed into some pretty healthy returns. So, what's next for our business? One is growth. Currently, we've developed a pretty good pipeline of projects which we're looking to bring into the market and bring through. We're actually in the process now of raising £1 million just to deal with the current pipeline that's immediately in front of us. Full details of that fundraise is available on our website. there'll be notes there, but you can Google us. But yeah, wallsandfutures.com, investors, how to invest, and all the details are there. We're also working with FX, the ethical investment platform, where again the offer is available there too. But you could also make an investment from as little as £300. So I guess it's a question and answer.
Any questions, anybody? I've got one. You're trying to raise £1 million at the moment. Is that an equity raise through a share offer on Next?
Yes, that's it.
Have you talked to Dave Mutton maybe about share offers? And that money is going towards a provision of another home, is it? Is that
yeah. So we've got a pipeline of projects that we're looking to make the investments in. Because we don't acquire portfolios, we work directly with directly with the local authorities and with the registered providers and charities. It can be a slightly longer journey, but for us what's quite important is that we're adding capacity. We're not in this financial arbitrage business, and it also means that we're actually, I feel, add greater value, both in terms of the quality of the product that we can deliver, and I think that also enhances the return that we can create as well.
Do local authorities apply a rent cap?
Basically, the process works. It depends on the type of housing that you have. Within supported housing, it depends on the way that it's funded is via the benefit system, housing benefit. But depending on your level of need, they look at the total package. So, for example, in the example that we gave, the investment, for example, the bath alone is £8,500. So you can't work within the existing rent cap. So what there are is additional top-ups in which the Housing Benefit Office will basically review that, look at the need. Is it available in the open market? That kind of property clearly isn't. And more often than not, what they need to do is secure quality, appropriate housing for the long term. One of the challenges that they've faced is that if you rent in the open market, you're renting from a private landlord on typically a 12-month, maybe a 24-month AST. So you don't actually have security of tenure. You don't actually have security of where you live. And usually no one's looking to make that kind of investment. So yeah, there are rent caps, but supported housing steps outside of that because of its need.
Any other questions? Lady at the back.
Hello. I think your presentation was fantastic.
Thank you.
And I think what you're doing is superb. Obviously, you've chosen supported housing. Is that because, as well, it's almost a protected investment? Because, obviously, if you're renting just to general public properties here and there, then obviously there's the risk of market crash, and then obviously landlords will have empty properties because they can't rent them out or they can't sell them. With this business venture you're doing, is this you're choosing supported housing because obviously it's a guaranteed rent? Really, it's there is always going to be a need there, isn't there, in the future?
Well, I think that there's a need for housing throughout the UK. That's one thing we definitely know. And social housing has been one of the areas where there's been very little investment. I think, well, from a business perspective, the reason we ended up in supported housing was when we were reviewing the marketplace. One of our key supporters had a member of their family who actually went through the mental health system and needed supported housing, and they ended up living at the other side of the country. And when you're forced to move away from your family, you actually don't have the familial support and you end up regressing. And so from a mental health perspective, it doesn't work. So that's actually one of the reasons we looked at it. So we wanted to challenge it that way. And what we actually saw, there were people investing in the sector, but the quality of the portfolios weren't very good, which is why we don't like to buy portfolios, we like to invest. And yes, there's definitely this element that you have a long-term income because, for example, in the illustration that we've got of the project that we did in Stroud, it is a 25-year lease, so there is secure long-term income. But there's nothing guaranteed. I think there's definitely challenges within government. The money is currently ring-fenced, and that was a recent announcement last year. But it's like everything in government, it can change, and it might be at some point in the future it is given to local government. It will be ring fenced, and then again it might be once that comes down, they might look at it. So for us, we're very much about trying to create financial models that are long-term sustainable. It's not about extracting as much as possible from it. It genuinely is about and it's possible, and we're delivering it. Is quality housing which fits a sustainable funding model. So we're interested in the sector, 100%. There's lots to be done, and there's great financial benefits if you invest and have the right strategy and have the right intention. But at the same time, there's also a massive need which we can fulfil. London has more than enough luxury homes, but what we definitely need is more supported and social housing.
Are you looking at working with any other charities to do something very, very similar?
We're literally talking to charities up and down the country and registered providers, and we're talking to local authorities and commissioners throughout the country. A lot of 2016 was, during our restructuring phase, was just getting to understand the market. Before we even made the commitment, we'd sat down with social workers, with housing officers, with commissioners, with the charities, with the registered providers, because we wanted to understand inherently what's wrong with the system, why isn't this working? And we wanted to come up with a solution that was not about, fundamentally, it is possible to go in and make a lot of money in a very short space of time. But we're about putting together a sustainable long-term business which for us meets our customers' need, and our customer is the local authority, is the charity. And I think that's possible, and I think we're achieving it.
Are you choosing these properties in collaboration with the local authorities and charities, and are they kind of working with you at sort of the stage one to sort of put the specific challenge that they might have, a particular type of disability that might need to be covered? So when you built that project in Stroud, all of the walkthrough stuff that you described to help support somebody, was that done bespoke to the needs of that particular borough?
Well, yeah, pretty much that was 100%. We work in partnership to create assets that actually meet the need. Our preference, refurbishing a Grade 2 listed building is actually really, really challenging. It's not our preference. You have a huge fight with the planners. So, for example, we couldn't really change the windows there. We would love to, but that was going back to have another fight about were we changing the character. Our preference would be, for example, to build new. Because that gives us the opportunity to create a property that A, matches the need, but can also have facilities within it that mean that as the need of the people that live there changes, or they might move on, that the building can have future purposes. So we try to look at that, but we work in collaboration to understand from a strategic level, which is why we work with the commissioner, because commissioners are there looking at the next 10, 20, 30 years. Throughout parts of the country, supported housing isn't such a big issue. And for example, extra care is a massive problem for them because they've looked at the demographics, and they've looked at the census data that's come through, and they've suddenly realised we've missed something here. Or in some parts of, for example, again, focusing on extra care for 2 seconds, is that actually, particularly wealthy parts of the UK, where house prices are very high, and there's lots of wealth, well, you can afford to pay for your own long-term retirement living in an extra care scheme. But local authorities can't afford to compete, so no one's providing them with a product, so they have to. So again, for us, it's working with the commissioner level to understand the need and deliver the right product. It's not just on spec, we've got something, would you like it, take it.
Thank you.
And time for one more question. Remember, we've got a question. Any more questions? As an investment trust, obviously, there's 2 questions I've got there. Can you borrow money to expand your portfolio quicker?
We can. We have the ability to. My preference is to, fundamentally as a real estate investment trust, we're working to create a long-term income for our shareholders. And I think you need to get to a certain scale before that really kind of makes sense. But we don't exclude it, no.
And what's your share price compared with a net asset value at the moment?
I think compared to there is a small discount at the moment. Our last published net asset value was 94 pence. There's been a small movement in the share price over the last few days. I'm not too sure exactly where we are. We're pretty close. It's actually quite a small discount.
That's quite good. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.